Good afternoon, guys. Welcome to the Painted Pen, and thank you everyone for coming. Today I'm going to be teaching a class on the varietal focus of the Torrontés grape variety, the great white grape variety of Argentina. There's going to be 3 learning objectives that we're going to go over today. So after leaving the class today, hopefully you guys will be able to first discuss the typical attributes of the grape variety of Torrontés, including some of its genetic background, history, and tasting profile. Secondly, we'll describe the impacts of the high altitude vineyards of northern Argentina, more specifically the Cafayate sub-appellation within the Salta region of northern Argentina, and the things and the impacts that it does to the wine and the final product in the bottle. And lastly, we're going to taste the 2013 Criollos from Susana Balbo, the Torrontés from the Salta region of Argentina. And we're going to do this using, as a background and a frame of reference, the Society of Wine Educators Tasting Rationale Guideline. So just remember, it's just there for background information, but I'm going to take you guys kind of through the grid orally and verbally. We're going to evaluate the sight, nose, and palate of this wine, kind of using that deductive reasoning. It just kind of helps pick up certain aromas and shows you how to evaluate the wine using those 3 components of sight and analyzation, your palate, and your nose as well, okay? But first, let's go back to the first learning objective. We're going to discuss the typical attributes of the grape variety of Torrontés. So Torrontés is one of the most in-trend, popular grape varieties in existence right now. It's one of those kind of what I like about Torrontés is it's very fresh, it's very floral, it's very clean and easy to drink, but it's very reminiscent of Muscat and Gewürztraminer. It's grown in predominantly actually it's grown throughout Argentina, predominantly in northern Argentina on the high altitude vineyards of Salta and La Rioja as well. There are 3 sub-varieties of Torrontés in the Argentine wine culture. There's 3 sub-varieties, which are Torrontés Rioana, Torrontés Malvasia, and Torrontés Sanjuanino. The predominant one that you're going to see mostly, the most plantings and the most acreage throughout Argentina is Torrontés Rioana. These are the wines that have the most high quality, that have really showcased the grape variety and what it's capable of doing. There's similar differences, there's a lot of similarities and a lot of differences between the sub-varieties, but the biggest ones are with Torrontés Rioana and Torrontés Sanjuanino. They're smaller, tighter clusters, and they're paler grapes. The Torrontés Mendocino are generally like larger, darker yellow colors, but larger, looser clusters. Torrontés Rioana, which is the most prominent and the most planted, like I discussed, is by far the most aromatic. When you think of Torrontés, the first thing you think of is you think of aromatics, and when you think of Torrontés Rioana, that's what demonstrates that true kind of Muscat character, and we'll discuss kind of the influences in relation of Muscat to Torrontés here shortly. So you've got Torrontés Rioana as the most planted, the most aromatic, the most complex, and the highest quality, and then probably on the far end of the spectrum you've got Torrontés Mendocino, the least amount of acreage under the vine and planted in Argentina, and it's also the least aromatic. It's predominantly Torrontés Mendocino is predominantly planted in southern Argentina in the Patagonia region of Rio Negro, whereas Torrontés Rioana is predominantly focused in the north in Salta and La Rioja, whereas Torrontés Sanjuanino is predominantly focused in exactly what it sounds like, in the province of San Juan, hence the name Sanjuanino. Okay, so those are some basic similarities and differences between the 3 varieties. They're all part of the Criollos family of grape varieties. And Criollos family of grape varieties are American cultivars of the Vitis vinifera from the European varieties. So these are all part of that Criollo family in terms of the grape varieties. In terms of genetic linkage and parentage and background, DNA testing has proven that Torrontés, actually all 3 grape varieties, all sub-varieties of the Torrontés minus the Mendocino, Torrontés Rioana and Torrontés Sanjuanino, all come from the crossing of the 2 grapes Mission, which was once believed to be Criolla Chica, and Muscat of Alexandria. You heard me mention Muscat. Muscat is indigenous to Alsace, France, and it's one of the most floral, bouquet-driven aromatic grape varieties in existence, and that's why you see a lot of similarities when you smell Torrontés, and a lot of times when people blind taste wines not knowing what they are, that's why they sometimes pick up on Torrontés as being Muscat. So that is the genetic parentage. The only one that I did that doesn't link to those two parent grapes of Mission and Muscat of Alexandria is Torrontés Mendocino. The parent is definitely Muscat of Alexandria, but they've yet to identify the other grape variety that was the cross to make that particular strain of Torrontés. Okay. So that's, we talked a little bit about the DNA, the parentage, some of the similarities, and some of the differences between the three subvarieties of Torrontés. Let's talk about the taste profile as well. Like I said, Muscat, which is one of my favorite grape varieties in existence. When I think of flower-driven grape varieties, I think of Muscat, also from Alsace, France, like I said. Gewürztraminer, which is also from Alsace, France. Alsace is the hotbed of great white wines of the world. They make your Pinot Blancs and your Rieslings and your Pinot Grigios, but they do really well with the floral-driven grape varieties of Muscat of Alexandria, Muscat à Petit Blanc. There's several different strains of Muscat, and also Muscat and Gewürztraminer, and those are the two grape varieties that I associate closely Torrontés, and it obviously makes sense because one of the parents in terms of the crossing is actually Muscat of Alexandria. Okay, but the typical grape variety in terms of the typicity of style with Torrontés, like I said, first off, when you think of Torrontés, you think of aromatics, you think of bouquet, you think of flowers. I think of balance, especially when it's coming from the northern provinces in Argentina, especially from Salta and the Cafayate sub-appellation. Definitely have more balance in these wines. Also, definitely there's body in these wines because it's a warmer climate in Argentina. There's definitely a lot more body. There's higher alcohol. There's definitely more mouthfeel and viscosity when you taste these Torrontés wines. They're very clean. They're very balanced. They're very refreshing. There's so many different reasons why to like these Torrontés wines, and that's why they're so popular and in fashion today. So there again, we talked about the typicity of style. We talked about a little bit about the parentage and the genetic and DNA background. We also discussed some of the basic sub-varieties, the three sub-varieties with Torrontés Rioana, Malvasia, and San Juanino. Okay, that is our first learning objective that we just discussed. Let's move on to the second one, which is discussing the higher altitude vineyards of northern Argentina. So when you think of Argentina, you have to think of a very mountainous terrain. Remember, this is home of the Andes Mountains, some of the highest mountains in the world in terms of elevation. So Mount Aconcagua, which is in the Cuyo region of Argentina, Cuyo meaning surrounding Mendoza. Mendoza is the home, the hotbed of what put the Argentinian wine industry on the map. Remember, Argentina is the 5th largest producer of wine in the world. I think it's the 8th largest country in the world. And remember, one of the biggest cities in the world with Buenos Aires. So everything's centered on the central part of the country, feeding off of the metropolis and the capital city of Buenos Aires, and leading and surrounding into the wine country area of the Mendoza Valley. So that is the Cuyo region. The Cuyo region is predominantly made up of Mendoza and also San Juan. In the north, we talked about the northern regions of Salta. You've got Jujuy and Catamarca, and also La Rioja. And in the south, in the subtropical desert, arid areas of the south, you've got the Patagonia region of La Pampa, Rio Negro, and Neuquén as well. Okay. But when you think, like I said, because there's all of this impact of the high altitude vineyards in the Andes Mountains, all of the vineyards are shredded around the foothills of the Andes Mountains, or at least that's the prominent growing areas. But because it's such a warm climate, you're close proximity to the Atlantic Ocean, you've got high mountainous, high altitude vineyards of the Andes Mountains. it's very warm, but as you go north into the Salta region, which is the wine that we're going to be talking about here today, this is the prominent region, or at least for Torrontés Rioana, that's proven to make the best Torrontés grape varieties and the best examples of what this variety is capable of. The reason for that is the high altitude vineyards, there's more of a diurnal shift in temperature. So it's very warm, like I discussed, it's very hot. There's a lot of days of sunshine. It's very warm throughout the course of the day, a lot of hours of sunshine. But in the higher altitude vineyards, it brings cool breezes. There's actually a fierce, hot, dry wind called the Zonda wind that comes off the Andes Mountains and floats into the northern regions of Argentina. This fierce, hot, dry wind helps cools the grapes in the evening time. So you have this diurnal shift in temperature, very hot during the day, but also in the mountainous regions and these higher elevated vineyards, it gets very cool in the evening time, which creates a higher acidity in the grape and the final product of the wine. This is the primary reason why you see more balance and more complexity in these wines coming from the north. Because of these higher elevated vineyards, they're increasing the levels of acidity, which makes for a better balanced, finished byproduct in the wine. Sometimes Torrontés wines in the south, they can be very alcoholic, they can have less acidity, and they come off as very bitter. In the north, because of this added acidity coming off the cool breezes in these higher altitude vineyards, it's cooling down the grapes are becoming more acidic, the wine's more refreshing, and the overall byproduct of the wine is a much more balanced wine. And when I look at wines and wines that I like to put on my wine list and wines that I like to showcase to my patrons and my establishments, I like wines with finesse, balance, and complexity, and that definitely helps further these higher altitude vineyards in the north, help further that style of wine and the capabilities of what this grape variety can do. Okay, so now we just discussed the impacts of the higher altitude vineyards of the north, specifically in Salta and the Cafayate sub-appellation of the Salta region in northern Argentina. Lastly, I want to taste this beautiful wine in front of you. This is the Susana Balbo Criollos Torrontés. So Susana Balbo is one of the benchmark producers of all of Argentina. She makes excellent Malbecs, which is obviously what has put the Argentinian wine industry on the map, was the great inky, black, spicy, fruity-driven Malbecs of Argentina. But we're not here to talk about Malbec. We're here to talk about its white counterpart and what the Argentinian wine industry is doing for the world of wine. And this is the Criollos Torrontés from Susana Balbo, from the Salta region, from the Cafayate region, sub-appellation of northern Argentina. So we don't necessarily have to, we're not using the grid, you don't have to use the grid to talk about this wine, but I wanted you guys to have a frame of reference when I'm taking you through this wine on the sight, nose, and palate, just a frame of reference on what I'm talking about, just so it makes a little bit more sense, okay? So when you evaluate a wine, you always evaluate it on 3 different analyses. The sight, looking at it obviously, right? The nose, smelling it, and everything is coming through. You taste through the way you smell. Everything is taste through your olfactory bulb, okay? And then finally the palate, which is obviously tasting the wine, okay? First, let's look at the sight of the wine. When you look at the white wine, you want to look at it against the white background. So if everyone, I'm sorry, it looks like I took your glass there, ma'am. I've got this one over here. If you actually look at the wine against the white background, you're looking first off for clarity. I like to see if I can tell the time through, look at my watch and tell the time through the glass. Would you guys consider this wine clear and transparent, or is it like opaque and dark and you cannot see through it? Clear. This one is clear, right? Okay. Absolutely. This one is clear. It's also, if you look at the way against the white background, you see the reflection. Clarity also refers to the way that the wine reflects light. And if you look at it, you're talking about brightness. This wine is definitely bright, as it definitely has a strong capability of reflecting light here as well, okay? When you swirl the glass, what I'm doing is I'm oxygenating the wine here, but when I swirl it, I'm doing that because I'm trying to get oxygen into the wine, but I'm looking at it against the back of the china here, and I'm looking for the legs. Sometimes you hear the term legs or tears. This is talking about evaluating alcohol or sugar content. When the fatter, the slower the tear, the more higher the alcohol possibility in the wine, or possibly the higher the sugar content. The quicker, the faster the tear, the lower the alcohol in the wine, or possibly the lower presence of residual sugar in the wine as well. On this wine, I'd say, if you look at it, it's got big fat tears and they're going slowly down the glass. To me, I'm thinking this wine either one has some presence of residual sugar, or two, which is more what's causing this, is that this wine has a higher alcohol that's sticking to the actual glass. And if you can see that, I would say that this wine is going to be high in alcohol, and you call this viscosity. Viscosity means literally the way the wine moves in the glass, but when you talk about viscosity, you're evaluating the legs or the tears, or overall evaluating if there's going to be a higher percentage of alcohol or sugar content in this wine, okay? There's no staining the tears. Staining the tears usually refers to red wine, and you're talking about concentration and looking for, is it a thin skin or a thick skin grape variety? But for a white wine, that doesn't really pertain. Also, you're looking for evidence of gas or sediment, but I don't see any evidence of gas or sediment in this wine. On the nose, let's go ahead and smell the wine. On the nose, the primary aromas, when you talk about primary aromas, you're talking about fruit-driven aromas, okay? With white wine, there's a lot of different fruits. There's tree fruit, there is orchard fruit, there's stone fruit, there's tropical fruit, and there's citrus fruit. What, William, what dominant flavor what classification of fruit would you say is present mostly here? Citrus fruit, tropical fruit, stone fruit, or orchard fruit?
Tropical fruit.
Absolutely. So definitely a lot of tropical fruit. Great call there on the tropical fruit. Anyone want to name a specific tropical fruit that you're getting?
Apricots coming through.
Yeah, absolutely. So apricot, would definitely like more. I think of apricot more of like a stone fruit, very peachy and apricot-y. So absolutely stone fruit, but I get a lot of tropicality in this wine. There's like a little bit of guava and passion fruit and mango. There's a lot of fruits. This is one of those great wines that you can't really name a fruit and it's not present. There's so many different fruit aromatics coming out of this glass, but it's definitely dominated by tropical fruit, stone fruit. I'm also getting a little bit of citrus fruit with a little bit of lemon and lime as well. But peach, apricot dominated with a little bit of tropical fruit as well, okay? So when you talk about primary, you talk about fruit-driven aromas. When you talk about secondary aromas, you're talking about earth, and an earth in a white wine is referred to as minerality. When you think about minerality, what does it sound like? Minerals, right? What are minerals? They're rocks. They're inorganic compounds that can't be dissolved by the earth. So when you think of minerals, you're describing like slate, chalk, limestone, granite. These are all subsoils throughout all of the winemaking vineyards in wine growing countries throughout the world. So you talk about minerality, earth, flowers or florality, spices, herbs, and wood, okay? Any strong, out of all the secondary aromas I just discussed, florals, spices, herbs, wood, or earth, which one is standing out in this wine, Mike?
Definitely florals.
Florals, absolutely. Great call and identification there. This is a super floral grape variety. Remember, we talked about the typicity of style. The number one dominant trait to me in an aromatic Torrontés is that beautiful floral bouquet. I'm getting like potpourri, I'm getting all sort of like lilacs and lilies, fresh white flowers, but they're fresh. They're not dried flowers. Yeah, I'm sorry, potpourri, probably not as much potpourri because potpourri is more of a dried flower. I get like fresh white flowers, lilacs, lilies, orchids. It's very perfumey, but it's very refreshing to smell. Isn't that like a really pretty aroma that you wouldn't really expect in a lot of different wines? So florality is what I'm talking about mostly in secondary aromas. Yeah, there's a little bit of spice here, which also associates as kind of likening to Gewürztraminer and Muscat. I get a little bit of like white pepper and some spice-driven aromas here that are very similar to those two grape varieties. But to me, this wine's about spice, this wine's about florality, and this wine's about an abundance of fruit, okay? That's the strongest secondary aromas I'm getting here. I'm not really getting any evidence of wood. I get stainless. It's probably aged in a neutral vessel or stainless steel because they want to focus on those beautiful floral aromatics and those fresh fruit-dominated aromas, okay? On the palate, let's taste it real quickly. On the palate, when you classify dryness, remember dry meaning not sweet, no presence of sugar. Sweet meaning sweet with off dry somewhat in the middle. Is this wine dry? Is this wine sweet, or is it somewhere in the middle? Carrie?
A little
bit in the middle. I wouldn't call it bone dry, but it's dry. It's got that lush fruit. Remember, we described all those beautiful like citrus fruits and the peach and the apricot and this lush tropical fruit. So absolutely, I agree. I'd call it dry, but not bone dry. Definitely those floral aromatics are coming through with those lilacs, those lilies, those fresh cut white flowers. Some of that sweet spice is coming through as well. It's not wood spice, but just some of that other spice that likens it to Gewürztraminer and Muscat as well. And some of that minerality is coming through as well. But the most important part of evaluating a wine on the palate is the structural components. So you're talking about acidity, tannins, alcohol, bitterness, body. These are all your structural components. When you talk about a wine being structurally, very structured, those are the things that you're talking about. What I want to point out here structurally is the wine has a backbone of acidity. Although the wine, if you taste it, it definitely has some heat. You can taste some of that ethanol. It's definitely like medium plus to higher in alcohol. What I like about this, because it's from northern Argentina and the Salta region, it also has that counterbalancing acidity to balance out some of those high alcohols and that thick texture. It's got a lot of body to the wine. So this is a pure, great example of Tarantes. It's full-bodied. It's got aromatics. It's higher in alcohol, which is true to the variety, but it also has a lot of acidity, which is what I wanted to demonstrate out of the northern vineyards of Argentina today. Okay. So in recap. Today we got to taste the beautiful Crios Tarantes from Susana Balbo. We used the tasting grid from the Society of Wine Educators as a background and frame of reference.